Everything we know, from people and ants to stars and galaxies to quarks and atoms, the entire universe, might just be a simulation running inside a supercomputer inside an even bigger universe. Ancient philosophers said that the universe is a dream that we're waiting to wake up from. In this dream world of the imagination, anything is possible. All cultural items, from the dreams of our rodent-like ancestors, to books, to television shows, are merely permutations of the reality we think we live in. Today's age of computers and video games places simulations at the center of our cultural consciousness. A select group of us perform simulations for fun and profit, and we call them games, role-playing and otherwise. We live to run simulations. Join us on the Simulationist podcast as we explore our culture of simulations. Hello and welcome to another episode of The Simulationist. Today is October the 9th, 2012.
This is episode 5, I believe.
Yep, and that's my co-host, Ryan Kirby, over there, and I am Josh Trelevin.
All right. This episode is brought to you by Caffeine. They're not actually sponsoring, but we wouldn't be here without it.
Caffeine. Yeah, that's true. That is true. So, hello, Ryan. We've been...
Good day,
talking already a little bit, but hello, listeners.
Welcome to our discussion. We're already 2 hours in.
Yeah, we usually do a little... we eat before we go on the podcast so that you guys don't have to listen to us crunching away. Or so, things like that.
Yeah, it's just good table manners, I suppose.
Well, we're trying to be as inoffensive to your listening ears as possible. We're not necessarily trying not to offend your intellectual sensibilities, but we are trying to...
not gross you out.
Yeah, at least until we get some feedback on the matter. See which way we can go with that.
Makes sense to me.
Okay, so do you want to get right into topics here?
Yeah, let's delve right on in.
Okay, so the topic that I have, it's not a question necessarily, but I might be able to form this into a question. The topic is practice makes perfect, and by that I mean, well, we all know that NaNoWriMo is coming up. It's October now, so still a few more weeks until NaNoWriMo starts.
About 21 days. Give or take a couple number of hours, depending on how you're
Give or take hours. Yeah, we should probably start counting the hours down. So I'm going to participate in NaNoWriMo myself. I'm going to at least attempt. I'll probably write the first 5 days, and then that'll be...
You'll blow a fuse, and then things will start smelling like burnt toast, and
well, basically,
you have to give it a rest.
Day 6, I'll probably say, yeah, I guess I've written 5 days. I could probably take a day off, and after that, I won't get back to it.
Oh, no, trust me, I've done some writing challenges in the past, and that is definitely not the way to go about it. You have to keep putting it out just until it hurts, and then just keep on going.
Well, okay, that's what I'm going to try and do, even if it hurts. So NaNoWriMo has this idea behind it that in order to get good at writing, to write something, you got to do volume. In order to get into it, you got to do volume. And there has been some criticism against NaNoWriMo that putting all that volume out there doesn't really accomplish much, or that it just makes a bunch of crap and your time could be spent doing something better, and so on. So the premise of NaNoWriMo is that this practice makes perfect. And that's what I wanted to talk about.
Well, I'm going to say, effectively for me, NaNoWriMo is like Mensa. Good idea, fundamental concept, flawed execution.
Ah, okay.
It's one thing to just work it out and do the brute force, but if you're not actually taking the time to study, listen to your criticisms, and go over what you've done, to actively make the effort to try to better yourself, you're really not going to better yourself. At best, it'll be slightly incidental. You'll learn how to spell better so you don't have to constantly avoid typing that one word, because does it with an A or is it an I? Oh, maybe it's with an E. Forget it, I'll use another word entirely. That's not really progressing as a writer, now is it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, one of the problems we have as writers is getting started. Well, as as the general public who kind of has an interest in writing, I should say, not as actual writers, because actual writers kind of look down their nose at NaNoWriMo because they're all writing 50,000 words a day or something crazy like that.
Well, they do say if you want to be a writer, you're going to have to write at least 1,000 words a day. And those are words you keep, not just little words like, okay, this is the plot outline. No, this is actual finished product of writing.
All right, and so I guess the thing about NaNoWriMo is that we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves when we say, oh, you got to polish it and make it right good, because that's supposed to be what happens after.
Well, don't get me wrong. I mean, if you're not writing anything, you're not going to increase in your capabilities at all. It's a little like the lottery in that case. Your odds of anything great coming out of it are pretty slim, but if you aren't part of a system, you don't enter into it, you're definitely not going to get anything out of it. Yeah. No lotto ticket, no chance of winning. No writing bad stuff, no chance of a pearl coming out of it.
Okay, yeah, and that's fair enough. And the thing, like I've always said about NaNoWriMo too, is that even if you just write bad stuff, you've still at least had the experience of writing, and hopefully it was enjoyable. I mean, I know people say, oh, it's torture and whatnot, but it's also, it's almost like meditation in a way. It's kind of healthy somehow.
Well, provided you take the right perspective on it. This all has to be taken with, a value of perspective. Like, for the people who say, oh, it's torture to wind up writing that, why are you doing it if it's torture? Why are you doing it if you're liking it to horrible travesties that are banned by legal conventions across multiple nations?
Yeah, exactly. And some people will say, oh, it's because I'm a masochist?
Yeah, well, I mean, I understand, I think what they understand deep down is that if they don't sit down and do this, they're going to realize they're not exercising that writing muscle, and it's going to atrophy. So even if they do it 1 month out of 12, at least that's, I don't know, I guess a little bit of a tune-up exercise then for them.
Yeah, I would think. It's like, going out for that jog once a year,
Yeah, on the 2nd of January, after you make your resolution to become more fit?
Yeah, exactly. That should be the NaNoWriMo month. It should be January, after you make your resolutions.
Oh, but everyone's too busy with other stuff. You do it near the end of the year, so you can make the resolution to do it, on January. Oh, I'll become a better writer this year, and then you can put it off to an hour, to the whole thing right near the end of it, and there you go.
Yeah. And now I wanted to ask whether practice makes perfect when it comes to my favorite topic, simulationism. When you apply it to making a game or writing an adventure or just being a dungeon master, does practice make perfect? And should you just go ahead with something that's a little less complete?
Well, I think in this case, nobody starts off as the ultimate dungeon master when they're writing their stories. They tell some pretty embarrassing stuff. They have some monsters that really don't work. They had the concept in their head, but the execution was flawed. How do you figure out the execution is flawed? You put it out there and the players just totally trash it. But if you listen to what the players are saying, you find out what you did wrong, then you learn how to correct it.
Well, although I wouldn't say just listen to the players, because the players will often say things like, oh, I wish my character didn't die, or, obviously if you killed their character unjustly, that's another thing, but, they'll say things like, oh, I wish I had more treasure, or, the kind of like, the stuff that players are supposed to want. And as the DM, you have to be able to say, well, I'm withholding this because of this reason. You don't want your game to suck because of that, but also, yeah.
Well, yeah. Okay. Always take the criticism with a piece of advice. Realize that it's not always objective criticism too, which is something you should definitely make sure you're paying attention to when you're doing writing. Like, even if you're just writing fan fiction about something, some people are going to take whatever you do a little more personally than they should. How dare you put those two characters together? How dare you split those two characters apart? They have emotional investment in them. So, they aren't exactly the best source of criticism. But I think with a little time, a little patience, you can decide for yourself which ones are to be listened to and which ones are clearly just a person desiring something else.
Yeah, okay. Yes, that sounds good. Okay, I also wanted to bring up, with regard to practice makes perfect, you gave me a little anecdote earlier. Anecdote. You were telling me that you started drawing.
Yes.
And
yes.
that what happened was...
After 30 minutes, my head hurt.
Okay.
The concept of trying to put an image in my head onto paper was so alien to me because, I mean, okay, we all did art class in grade school. And I remember being not great, but at least adequate at the whole stuff. I can't do that now. I have let that skill just go by the wayside and become forgotten. Such that actually trying to draw a person with proper perspective and proportion hurt. It was so alien to my thought patterns, it drained me. Like when you try and speak a new language, how it's exacting and exhausting and taxing.
Wow, I mean, that's interesting.
But why did I do it if it hurt? Why would I compare that to something that was incredibly negative? Well, I did it because I wanted to better myself as a person. One of my greatest failures, I believe, is having little to no artistic skill.
Okay, yeah.
I think I just contradicted myself from earlier. I'm growing as a person.
You're growing as a person. Okay.
I criticized myself, I understood the criticism, and I grew from that.
So let me ask you this. I got the sense earlier that you weren't going to attempt drawing again.
I will. I just have to make certain I'm not going to be doing anything later on in the day. If I'm going to be driving anywhere, I'm not going to be drawing beforehand. Don't draw and drive.
Okay. And now, drawing... we were saying that you learned something from this experience, that you learned how to draw, but you drew a horrible picture. You said it looked like someone in pain.
It was just supposed to be, a figure, like, okay, arms go out, and they're supposed to be about this long compared to the head, this long here, and the whole thing. And then when I tried turning the stick figure into a more flesh, type thing, it came out like some sort of incredibly agonized, silly putty person. I don't know how, it just seemed so crude and in so much pain. It didn't even have a face.
Well, you drew a person without a face. Well,
I didn't get as far to the face. I didn't want to intensify the pain anymore. After half an hour, the physical body looked like it was, racked with torturous pain, and so I said, well, you know what? The best thing I can do is not do any more. I'll now focus on something else, and then maybe I'll come back to it when my sketching hand is a little bit better off and knows how to do a curved line how I want it, or a straight line, or whatever.
Yeah, well, and I think this is where simulationism can even touch on simulationism. I talk about that as if it's a thing. It's just something I made up. Anyways, when you're drawing, you want to create... You're not necessarily trying to create a photograph with your hand. You're trying to evoke the things in your brain, the pattern recognition centers in your brain that say, and that's why I grabbed onto when you said it didn't even have a face, because I think kind of when you draw and when you create a visual thing for other people to look at, one of the first things that the brain naturally looks for in drawings is faces, and it tries to see, are there people here? I think this is even before you get to it consciously. So I think if you kept going on your picture and you added a face, I think it might turn a little bit more like into something. It might look a little better.
Okay, well, for me, I stopped without doing the face because the body language was so painful to me that it just seemed like the more advanced I would possibly make it, the more potential pain there could be. Like, let's go with a flatworm. A very crude organism isn't actually able to experience pain to the same degree we do. We have a much more complex and developed nervous system. And so I feared that if I was to make this sketch more complicated, it would only wind up increasing this poor figure's pain threshold.
Okay, well now I haven't actually seen this picture. Now I want to see it, and also I want to scan it into the computer and put it up.
I believe I may
You
have to
wanna do-
burn it in the end, although I will use the area around to maybe just sketch more basic stuff. I realized I am going to have to work on basic shapes before I'm going to work up to a human. I have to sketch triangles and squares and cubes and get them all right.
Yeah, okay. So I think we've basically established that it is a necessary step towards doing something great, or, like doing something good, that you have to do the bad stuff first.
Well, I don't think that you have to do bad stuff. I think without the experience under your belt, so to speak, bad stuff is all that's going to come out.
Okay.
Or at least, bad in relation to how you would ultimately prefer it. I mean, no one's going to look at a child's scribbles, when they're moving around with crayons. No one's going to say, "Little Susie, that is an absolute atrocity. I cannot believe you drew that. That is just, it disgusts me. It's not going anywhere near the fridge because that's where we put food."
I think I heard Louis C.K. doing something like that, though. How his kid is horrible at drawing and horrible at everything. But, I mean, I guess that's why he's funny, is because people don't normally think that.
Yes, well, I mean, that is one of the core concepts of humor, is doing what other people wouldn't or would never imagine doing, and portraying it in the right light. But no one can fault the kid's stuff as being anything less than crude. The kid's not trying to come out with crudeness. They're not trying for a bad result. That's all they can do at the time.
Yeah.
As they practice, as they learn things like little subtle things like perspective. That tiny house in the background is no longer just a tiny house because there wasn't room on the paper. They'll do something like maybe a corner or an edge of the house to show it's there. The sun won't always have the lines out. It'll be done in a different style as their knowledge base increases.
Yep.
So yes, mind you, of course, that unless you're actively processing towards these goals of doing better, you're only going to progress at a very incremental rate. The old saying goes that experience comes with age, but sometimes age comes alone.
Yes, okay, yes.
Depressing but true. If you're not willing to work for it, you're not going to really get very far.
And I also, I should add in, what's the place of teachers and all this? And if we can just move, I guess teachers are very specialized, so we'll talk about teachers in writing, basically creative writing courses. And, should you just always be taking creative writing courses your entire life?
Not necessarily. I mean, at a certain point, you learn how to learn for yourself. But we'll put this in a gaming term perspective. Okay. Having a teacher to aid you gives you a multiplier bonus to the experience earned. Because the teacher knows how the step process is supposed to go to get you from A to B, then they can help guide you that way as opposed to you just kind of wandering about and discovering the stuff piecemeal. You may encounter a really good piece of knowledge, like, this is how I would draw clothing on a figure. If you can't draw a figure, the knowledge isn't actually that good. If you can't, write the concept of how people realistically interact with one another, what matter is it being able to know how a story arc works?
Yeah. So,
really, the teacher is a mental version of a wildlife expert, or like a guide in the in the forests. They're the ones that help get you to where you want to go in a quick and efficient style.
Yeah, I mean, and there's the standing on the shoulders of giants idea. And
yes. Yeah.
I think that's normally applied to things like the sciences, but I think we should be able to do that with literature and with writing. And
it doesn't work exactly the same, but yes. If you want to try your hand at writing, you could just start by copying a particular writer's style. We'll go with Lovecraft. He had a very distinctive style. His stuff was always told in the past tense, written as though it were a document. He was big on guys writing stuff down posthumously. A few of his stuff had,
writing stuff down. Let me see. It should be anti-humously, and then it being discovered posthumously.
Well, not in all his stories. Sometimes there was a posthumous thing going on.
Oh, okay.
I was slipping that in, but yes, you caught me. Congratulations.
Okay, so if the guy's, his reanimated corpse is writing, then okay.
And that's the big twist in the story. But yeah.
Oh, we just spoiled it for you.
Well, I didn't tell you which story it was.
Okay.
But it was a very distinctive style he had. So if you don't know how to really tell a story, you can start by trying to tell it in a manner that Lovecraft would go for. If you have a more artistic bent, perhaps you might want to try writing stuff as Dr. Seuss would write it. Maybe your story is written in a style that could be, done in rhyme. That way it becomes more of a poem, an epic style. Then maybe that works for you.
I guess so. I mean, having tried rhyme, I recommend everyone try it. It's not the easiest thing in the world to rhyme things. If you can do it well, I guess, go for it.
Oh, yes. But like I said, some people have a natural gift for rhyme. So, if they're trying to write, perhaps making it go into a rhyming style helps progress things on for them. And then when you have more experience, you learn the little bits about, okay, avoid writing this way because then you kind of write yourself into a corner or it seems stilted. Then you can break out of the previous style and write in your own style, the one that you've developed with experience.
Yeah, okay.
This applies well with the arts, too, because you have some people that got good at artistic works by copying the masters.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so when he was doing an orange, he would do the round strokes so that when you saw the paint, it would go well and showed the illusion of roundness in it, as opposed to just going up and down in a round shape. So, yeah, you learn the little things by studying someone who knows more than you, and that's the artistic version of standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah, and I suppose if you were copying a master, and if you, what was it we were saying before about making mistakes and doing it poorly,
That's why pen names are important too, by the way.
Okay.
If you're writing and you think it's bad, get a different name for yourself, and then they can criticize your puppet name.
Oh, well, that doesn't sound right to me. I think you should stand behind all writing, even if it is bad. But I don't think that's the only reason to have a pen name.
Oh, yes, there are many. I mean, sometimes you just have a bad name. Nobody wants to read anything from a guy named Doofus. But there is sadly people out there with that for a surname. Maybe even a given name. So, a rose by any other name sometimes doesn't smell as sweet. To quote the master of masters.
Well, yeah, okay.
Haha.
Okay. So I think that topic, I think we're done with that.
Yes, it's good to put out volume, but without a critical eye to what you've produced, you're going to just keep putting out this low quality, we'll call packing junk. It fills, but it doesn't have much value.
But do it anyways.
Oh yes, it's a heck of a way to start, especially on the upcoming writing challenge next month. That's just how it goes. Sometimes you have to get that ultimate first step. Sometimes you have to get pushed into it to get you started. Any which way you get started, it's better than not starting at all.
Yep.
All right, next topic?
Yeah, you have a topic now?
Yes. Religious complexity within your fiction. How much is desirable? When does it become too much? And when should it just remain as like a background thing? Like, for D&D, most religions are just like, I worship this deity, and I will say, I guess my character prays daily, and that's it. It's just a background detail, maybe a one-line entry on a character sheet.
Yep.
Other places have it much more detailed, much more thought out. It becomes an entity unto itself. It has greatness on it.
Yeah.
So, why does a setting such as D&D tend to completely gloss over any religious aspects as to how it might affect the players?
Well, I wouldn't say completely gloss over, but I think what you're seeing is a
Large.
simplification, an extreme simplification because there are deities in the player's handbook, but they're very, like, that section is very short.
And I understand that for the basic setting, because the core 3 books, they have to be generic. Here's some sample guides for you. This is how it kind of works. And if you're doing your own setting, make up whatever you feel suitable. But I've noticed in a lot of the campaign settings, it's not much more than just that. Forgotten Realms has very little in it aside from the 17,000 different gods that they have that overlap and contrast and fight each other, but are ultimately just a small background portion plot devices.
So it has very little religion except 17,000 deities.
So there's 17,000. Well, okay, I don't know the exact number, but there is a lot. There is more than even some professionals in the field can keep track of.
Oh, I thought you were quoting an exact number. It's not 17,000?
Well, not exactly, but it is an excessive amount for almost any setting. They could do very well at reducing the overlap by having one god presented in several different ways based on some aspects of their portfolios.
I guess somebody could, do the work of that. Although, like, my tendency would be to leave it alone and just let whatever stories emerge.
Don't get me wrong. Ed Greenwood has created a wonderful setting that is very rich, but I found that part to be much more lacking than the other areas. The histories of the various small areas, very nicely detailed, very well written out, even back in the early days when it was just him doing it all. But the deities, there just seemed to be like they were either a plot device or almost completely ignored up until, oh, hey, let's focus Time of Travel's novel series on them, sort of thing.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
And then they effectively became characters themselves. But the Ravenloft setting had, I found it very interesting, they had a Church of Ezra. And I think Ezra was supposed to be ultimately true neutral in alignment, but they had 5 different churches in various areas of the domains based on the one alignment shift off from true neutral. So they'd have a lawful neutral church here. They'd have a true chaotic church over there. They'd have a neutral evil church in this area and a neutral good church. They all worship the same figure, but the different churches or chapters or whatever you want to call them worked very much differently, and in some cases the followers of this one figure would wind up coming at odds on almost any sort of issues because they come from diametrically opposed ways. I found that very interesting.
Okay, so you like that?
Oh, yes. And in the Eberron campaign setting, they tended to focus less on the deities, how you worship, as opposed to churches and various religious movements. There was the Church of the Silver Flame. You don't worship just the one god, you worship them as a group.
Yeah.
And I liked that as a church. It worked a little bit differently than just saying, I follow this god and that's where I get these 2 domain powers from and let's go.
Yeah, I did like, my feeling on that is maybe I just haven't played enough Eberron, but the deities themselves, they don't stick in my mind the way the ones, maybe they just didn't put enough work into them, but the ones in the player's handbook and like Greyhawk, they kind of, they feel more iconic, they stick in my head.
Well, they do have more history.
I guess that, yeah.
You can't deny that. But they all tend to be pray and play. There is very little difference from a warrior that worships Neril from a warrior who worships Hieronius.
Yeah, fair enough.
There's thematic differences, perhaps, but you can just, scratch out the one god's name on your character sheet, write in the other one, and it doesn't change anything.
Yeah, but that's because D&D is the fighting game, the game where you fight, the game where you play characters who kill each other. It's not the praying game, it's not the religion game. It can be a little bit the intrigue game, I suppose.
But don't you feel that they might be effectively losing out in specific campaign settings when they decide to ignore how the clerics and these clergy operate in relation to others and themselves, and within different chapters?
I suppose, yeah. If there's a campaign setting that, there are so many areas though where any campaign can be expanded, and that's one example. I suppose that's why we're talking about it.
And nobody wants it to become, well, I guess not nobody. Nobody in particular wants it to overly dominate a well-rounded campaign setting. It should be a nice part to help draw you in, help get you to know this and that. But,
because if you had religious like conflict and such at the forefront of your campaign setting, even if it wasn't that campaign where the churches or where it's all about religion, it sort of that becomes your new label.
But what I liked in we'll go with the Scarred Lands setting for this one, is that there was one god for each of the 9 alignments. Okay, technically 8 gods and a titan, but things get a little semantic at that point. One god for each alignment, and they have a history of working together against other forces. So you can be lawful good, you can be working with a chaotic evil person, and you two can still be united together against these other foes because your deities have a history of working as a united group. And I found that very interesting. That, oh yes, I can have a paladin and a blackguard working together in a party without having to worry how this happens, because their gods say we work together or we die apart. I dug it, man.
That doesn't sound that great to me. I mean, it's a way to have the group where you have a paladin and a blackguard in the same, a blackguard, I should say. That, by the way, is the correct.
Yes, I know, but it seems overly British when I say it that way.
Okay, I guess this is my somehow this sort of gamer has creeped into me and become the guy who says, no, you can't have a paladin and somebody evil in the same group. Because that just seems wrong to me, but maybe I just need to get used to the idea. I don't, perhaps.
Well, don't get me wrong, they still infight when there's not an other force there, but they do have a history of working against these other guys that would have wiped them out. So it's not just the small thing. You look at it from a grander perspective. They have a history of working, maybe not, hand in hand, skipping through the tulips sort of thing, but at least they'll fight together against the opponent C, the Titan spawn races.
And that's a good story for itself. I don't know if I would necessarily adopt it in my own campaign world, mainly because I want to have I might have it in the mythology or something. I wouldn't necessarily connect it one for one that as the gods as typology for the players, because I think that contradicting myself from before, I think you can have a paladin and a blackguard in the same party, but you can explain it within the party dynamic, and it doesn't have to be something that's decreed from on high, that, because the gods work together, now we have to work together.
Well, you don't have to work together, but the setting does say, if you don't work together, chances are you die alone.
And that's kind of a principle that sort of follows for all gaming and all of this idea where you get a group of adventurers together who all have a common purpose, whether that's just treasure or killing monsters or whatever. That's the narrative, is that you work together, and teamwork is good. And in some ways that can be reinforced by the deities, but it's also just common sense, and it's what we learn as we game.
Well, I just found it as a very nice and easy way of saying, back in the 2nd edition book, if you recall, they had an example of the various 9 alignments, saying, imagine, if you will, suspend your disbelief at a 9-person party,
yep,
working together, and how they would interact based on their alignments. And they said, okay, you're going to have to suspend your disbelief. Why would these 9 different alignments work together? And with just a little bit extra detail to the religion, there's suddenly an explanation that suddenly doesn't have to require a suspension of disbelief. It's these 9 guys were fighting opponent, that was against all of them equally.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like it because it does sometimes when something doesn't make sense, it takes a story to explain it. And that's what I like about being creative and creating a world and such, is that you get the opportunity to make those stories where, the chaotic evil guy works with the lawful good guy, and they're opposites, but they're working together.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, you can use the same sort of addition to religion to have people of the same alignment fighting each other, or close to the same alignment. Like, everyone knows about the blood war in D&D, chaotic evil versus lawful evil, which is the more evil of the two, and then they fight each other for all eternity. Nobody hears, like, the angels, the lawful good and the chaotic good fighting each other.
Yeah, and I've given that some thought too, and I've tried to. I've never actually put it together, but I've tried to rationalize like why they might fight.
Good. They usually give out a line. Good is more liable to ignore the differences and work together, because that's what good is all about.
Yeah, and part of it, there's this assumption in D&D that there exists an absolute goodness, and maybe I don't like to say that's absolutely incorrect. I like to bend it a little bit sometimes and say that maybe the angels aren't necessarily infallible. They try to be good, but
they have a non-aggression pact between each other that they can actually enforce and obey a little bit more.
Well, do you think angels would need a non-aggression pact? Like, wouldn't they kind of their natural state be peaceful? And then every once in a while, if something came in and disturbed the whole, the system, then there would be some conflict. And
I can actually see an interesting scenario where the chaotic good outsiders fight the lawful good ones, because they find them to be domineering, and that they're actually the lawful good tends to be the most good for the most amount of people, whereas the chaotic good focuses on the good of the person, the single person.
That's.
I can see them fighting over that sort of stuff, where it's like the chaotic good outsiders would be represented as more of a rebel sort of thing. Fight the power, whereas the lawful good guys are like, you're ruining our established good authority and you're causing negative ill will. We must fight you to stop this thing, because you are going to ruin it all. And I could see a fight breaking out over that. Hasn't apparently happened.
Well, I don't know.
I recall absolutely no D&D stories where such a thing occurs.
Yeah, but I can imagine somebody writing something like that, I'm sure. I mean, maybe that'll be me or you, or maybe somebody listening to this podcast.
Yeah, well, I got dibs. As much as you can call dibs on, a free-floating intellectual idea.
Okay.
But okay, here's the thing. Let's take a lawful good god with 4 domains. Now, a cleric can only have 2 domains at any given time. There's not actually that much rules for governing over switching out some domains based on whatever you do. So, as a cleric in D&D, you have 2 domains, right? With a potential 4 domains, that works out to 6 possible different combinations.
Yep.
So, you could very well encounter, let's see, there's about a 50% chance, just based on the randomness of it, half of the followers of the god share no domains with you. You're effectively 2 different churches. You can be focusing on good and healing. They focus on protection and law.
Right. Well, I can imagine a deity having 2 separate organizations. It might be one organization, but it could also be split into 2 or 4.
Under this set of circumstances, you could have as many as 6 different denominations of the one religion. It could be like Christianity and its various stuff, It's like these guys are Protestants, these guys are Reformists, these guys are Baptists, and they could all serve the same God, but they could be smacking each other behind the scenes, because dang it, when we tell this story, we focus on this, result, whereas when you tell it, you focus on something else entirely, and that's how come you get your weird, crazy portfolio ideas, that God works this way. And so you can get a lot of internecine fighting, which I think is good storytelling potential.
Yeah, well, I think so too, and it would be fun and exciting to read. And I think you asked a question, something like, why isn't this in D&D? And maybe nobody's thought of that particular angle.
Because, let's face it, sometimes you don't want to fight everybody because they're evil. They're, it's going to be evil, so it's okay to smite them. Sometimes it's good to say, you know what? You are the same alignment as me, but I'm going to break that jaw if you say one more word, buddy. Because it just seems like a little more real. Let's face it, not everybody out there is a bad person, but sometimes you just want to either leave the room when these guys are talking, or you just want to get them to just be quiet.
Yep.
And so I think, by adding that sort of extra little depth, a little wrinkle here, a little wrinkle there, you get a lot more out of it.
Okay, so, so are you saying, though, that this should be, like, somebody should write a book or something, or it's just something to think about when you're making a setting?
I think it's definitely something to consider when you're making a setting. Like, how does this god get perceived through the eyes of this race? Maybe through different races. Like, you could make a god be perceived as like a very good, nice urban god. He does urban planning and all this sort of thing. That's how humans interpret him. But the Minotaurs, he is the god of mazes. And yet, it's the same god. It's how they interpret it that it winds up being a thing. And so you have, oh no, there's these, monsters fighting us. Oh wait, they're actually worshipping the same god. Why are we fighting? Well, I guess we have to keep fighting because they're fighting us first. And then you get all these nice little details, these good storytelling elements.
Well, that right there, that's a short story right there.
A short D&D story, though. I'm not sure what the publishing capabilities are. Would be good to write up, just as an exercise in the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, if we do write up a short story mentioned on this, we'll always put it in our notes or give people a way to access it.
But see, here's the one thing, though, is for the Forgotten Realms, like I said, there's a lot of gods. And I think one of the reasons for this is the gods, for certain pantheons are from certain races. There's an Elven pantheon, a Dwarven pantheon. Heck, there's technically a Drow pantheon, which is like a dangling particle off the regular Elven pantheon.
Yeah, okay.
Well, they're trying to split, but they're still integrally connected, so they're kind of hanging on there, like a hangnail or something. However you want to perceive it.
Yeah, and I remember about the gnomes. They have all these gnomish gods, and I can't remember the Bervin Wild Wanderer, and Garl Glittergold is the leader. But they also have I'm not going to look it up right now, but they also have a trickster who's evil. Like they have one.
Yeah, like it's supposed to be his brother. The malevolent tricks. Why didn't it occur to them to start folding the stuff in like? This god has the same sort of domains as this god, but you know what? They're not two separate ones. They're just different ways to perceive the same.
Well,
and then it becomes much more complex.
Who are we combining? Like the
Okay, well let's take Garl Glittergold, the gnomish dwarf, or the gnomish. You can work it with dwarf and stuff. There's got to be like a dwarven sort of trickster sort of thing going on there. You can work it with the standard god, Olidomara. There's a trickster god for him. Yeah, I mean, why aren't these gods just different ways of perceiving one god through different eyes, different racial, perspectives?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I think that's similar to how kind of real world religions kind of developed. Not that they didn't necessarily originate from the same source, but
well, let's take the Roman pantheon in that case. It didn't start off with all of these gods here. They, the Romans took over a new land, and these guys have a really intriguing deity. Well, you know what? He's in here. Yeah, he works very well with these guys. So, okay, we'll write some stories about the whole thing. And the next thing you know, Pan's part of the pantheon.
Okay, is that what happened? Okay.
And it happened for a lot of them. I believe Aphrodite wasn't actually in there till about midway through. She was incorporated from some other stuff, I guess, around where Iraq is now, like the cradle of civilization sort of thing.
Okay. I was saying, like, in real world, it's not necessarily that the gods have different, the same origin, because they might origin, like, one tribe would have a god and another tribe would have a different god. And then, hundreds of years later, they would meet, and they would say, our war god is similar to that war god. Maybe we'll just kind of say that they're the same guy.
Or, see, that's the fun thing about the whole thing, is you can make it so that the second tribe's war god is much more of a sneak sort of war god. He's like the god of sneaking into your hut and slaughtering the opponent in the sleep. Whereas the first, Trag's war god, he's much more a march in there during the day and beat you up sort of god. And then they can say, well, it's the same god, but the sneaky god, that's the other god's shadow. He's the two facets of war, the open confrontation and the hidden conflict. And then bam, it's one god, two different ways to interpret fighting. And all of a sudden, the two war gods that seemed kind of before, suddenly have this nice dynamic as a whole. It props up a little bit better.
Better, I suppose. It's just another way of telling the story, which I like. So yeah.
And well, the thing is, as you mentioned, there are, for the Gnomish pantheon, there are these gods who does this and this wild one who does that. But you know what? When do they ever get mentioned? When do they ever get used? When do they ever do something important?
Well, I wish they were used more, yeah.
They could be used more if they were actually this other sort of god. If they folded in, then you wouldn't have so many gods. It just tends to wind up working out so that, oh, hey, when you use this god, because he's also, interpreted as gods B, C, D, E, and maybe F, then all those characters get used, and then that has some nice trickle through. This god gets wounded, in this sort of thing, then all of a sudden it starts playing into other religions, and other groups of the campaign world that otherwise would be unaffected.
Well, unfortunately, I'm not into the fiction well enough to know whether, because I imagine there are books out there that use the different gods. I don't know if you're more well read in
there's
official fiction.
Not a lot for some of the more obscure gods. There's actually more detail on demon princes. Not even the prime, 3 main demon, like some of the more obscure ones that really haven't been statted up since second edition. There's more stuff on them than there is on some of the racial pantheons.
Yeah, and I've been reading a little bit about Tolkien's world, and a lot of what he does is he just throws out a name, and he just says, "Oh yeah, the elves of so and so knew this guy, and he was a hero or whatever," and they just give he gives a line in somewhere, and then you find out later, oh well, he fleshed that out. He went ahead and he finished it, and he said, "Oh, there's this, and this that go with it." So that's a technique in writing. And in creating a new world where you throw out this idea, there's another god, and there's another god, and there's another god, and then only later you can come back and use it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hooks, and it allows you to grab on and connect up otherwise unrelated stories. And I'm always in favor of leaving a good couple hooks for people to grab onto, especially in a setting such as D&D, where if the players can grab onto something, then you've got them.
Yeah, I just also want to mention, if it sounds like maybe we're being critical of the people who write official fiction, I want to point out that I think this is something that we can apply to all of us, basically, because we're sort of talking about, because D&D is a game that we make our own, and that we build our own mythology into it, and we use the deities as we like.
It's much more inclusive than a standard novel might be, so it's easier for us to work with because we can get in there and we're supposed to get in there. That's what its purpose is.
Yeah, exactly. So when we say, there ought to be, people ought to use this more, we're kind of talking about ourselves in a way.
Well, of course. But mind you, there is also just so much you can do with any given setting. I can understand why it never got developed, fleshed out. But it certainly does shine when it does happen.
Well, yeah, it's an idea, and it's something that, one of the many things that you can add into to make your world more dynamic and exciting.
Be your world D&D, be it a novel you're making.
Yeah.
So, something to consider.
Yeah, okay, so I think we're done with that.
Yeah, I believe we've covered it sufficiently.
Okay, so on to the next topic, which I think it's my turn again to go. So, exceptions-based rules design. This is a buzzword that kind of popped up, I think, when they were developing 4th edition D&D, so this is going back 4 years ago, 5 years?
Let's say 6 years. They were doing some interesting stuff towards the end of 3.5 where they were starting to get the ball rolling.
And, okay, yeah, so that many years ago.
And it keeps us covered just in case our dates are all
Uh, sorry, we're not that worried about making mistakes. I mean, we try not to, but hopefully the listeners will forgive us for screwing things like that up. But anyways, the point I want to bring up shouldn't depend on whether we're right or not. Exceptions-based rules design was this thing that they threw out, and they said, well, we have some very basic core rules for D&D, a mechanic like let's see, the success failure mechanic is roll a d20, that's a 20-sided die, add modifiers or subtract, and compare to the target number. That's one kind of core rule. Mm-hmm. Then they added on a few, like there's classes and there's things like that. But after that, they start doing exceptions where, like, you can normally do this except when you have this power.
Oh, I think that's just more of a way to counteract power gaming is what they tried to do in that case.
Yeah, and so it almost became like almost a card game because you have your powers as cards, and you can only use that power in a certain circumstance, basically in the exception. So yeah, all of the things they made exceptions, but I was wondering if this whole term does it really tell us something informative about game design, or is all game design kind of exceptions based?
That's a good point. See, I guess it depends largely on why the exceptions are put in there. If they're put in there for game balance, it means different than if they're put in there because they feel that it doesn't meet with the style of what they're trying to accomplish.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, exceptions, generally they're something that improve what you're allowed to do. Like, you have a power that allows you to cleave. You can only cleave if you have the cleave feat. Otherwise, they just swing a sword.
Yeah.
So that's the exception to the rule where you swing a sword and hit an opponent. The exception is if you have cleave, now you can do something extra.
Hit two opponents.
So, yeah, I guess in some ways it balances the game because it makes the fighter powerful. Like, he can do a little bit of extra damage.
More versatile.
Yeah.
They become more of a threat against two opponents than against one.
That's right. And the other thing you said was...
based on style.
Oh, style.
Well, you can take the system of magic in the D&D setting. You can have it as a sorcerer. You can have it as a wizard. You can have it as a warlock. And if you want to maybe expand it out a little bit more, you can have it in a different style as the scion. One uses a few abilities at will. One uses, I have this range of knowledge which I can then apply as I want at certain times of day. A third guy says, I have to prepare it at the start of a day, but I don't have this limitation. And the fourth guy says, I have this point-based system.
Yeah, well, that's cool because it incorporates all these different solutions. I guess it's cool because, yeah, you have this one problem of getting things done in the D&D world. Like how do you be an adventurer? And you have 4 different ways of solving that. 4 different game design ways, basically. Not even talking necessarily about the role playing, but just the mechanics of the game.
Yes, which actually wound up, I believe, if I've been hearing things correctly, biting the developers on the hind for the 5th edition. They were trying to figure out how to work it out, and I think ultimately they're going to go with one style and then leave it up to the DM to allow it as multiple other styles, so as not to bog down gameplay. If you have all these potential options, as like it's there, you have to obey it, then it can really slow things down.
Yeah.
If you put it in as, okay, here's the one style, but if you want to do it a different way, here's styles 2, 3, 4. You can add them, you can substitute them, whichever way you decide is best. Ultimately, I think that's possibly the best way to go about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds good to me, and it sounds similar to basically the way D&D has been done in the past, because, I mean, people don't want to get rid of classes. They seem to like classes. They don't want to have a character that's not necessarily says wizard on the top, you know what I mean?
I think they could have done well in 3rd edition not to have put in the classes as they did. I still, to this day, think that a bard or a paladin should have been prestige classes instead of core classes. Maybe even the monk, too. You could all make arguments to them being a derivative off of one or more of the core classes. Fighter, spellcaster, which in this case would be like wizard or cleric, and the skill-based character, the rogue.
Okay, so you're in the camp of just basically 3 basic classes.
With almost infinite possibilities. If you go with a little bit of clerical healing power, a little bit of fighting, then you can progress into the paladin prestige class, which melds those two better than taking them individually would have. If you wanted to go arcane spellcasting a little bit with some skills, you could have become a rogue or maybe even a bard.
Yeah, well, I worry about that approach. It doesn't sound fun to me, because maybe it's because I'm used to the classes, but the classes to me, they seem to have a certain flavor that I like. Like, I like the idea of a bard, and I don't like the idea of having to create your bard by multi-classing with expert and spellcaster and so on, because expert and spellcaster don't feel flavorful to me. They don't feel like they don't have that essence of excitement.
That is one of the reasons why I'm never going to say to anybody, oh, why would you ever play a bard? That's a horrible class to play. Oh, why are you doing a paladin? That's so horrible. No, because they do add flavor. And that's why I am in the camp of start with 3, work your way out. But it's not like I'm living in the camp. Okay. I journey to the other groups.
All right. Yeah. No. Okay.
Because I gotta say, if there's no flavor, there's no style. There's only so much you can do with anything.
Yeah, I think so, and yeah.
Which is why I do like what they're doing in D&D Next to come up with. Well, I guess it's a variant on the second edition's kits. You could have a fighter generic, or if you had a kit, you could turn them into an Amazon. You could turn them into a gladiator. You could turn them into a knight. All the same effective class. But by adding this style onto it as a nice interchangeable stuff, then you don't need to have all these core classes. All you need to do is figure out, what kind of fighter am I going to be? And then all of a sudden, hey, you've got a monk. He's a fighter that focuses in pummeling people with bare fists, or things that are close to bare fists.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. I can see it working. I'd like to see it in action.
I can lend you some of the complete books if you want to ever read through them. I have a decent selection, and I believe they're very flavorful, which is why I collect them even though I haven't played a second edition game since 2000.
Well, that would make sense, because that's when third edition came out.
Some people like a nice retro campaign, and there's nothing wrong with that. It is fun, and it's good to learn your roots.
Yeah, well, I mean, technically I'm in the retro because my game is 3rd edition and 4th edition exists and 5th edition is soon to exist, so technically I'm one of those retro guys. I just happen to have a weird... I don't know how many...
You're a progressive retro. You prefer the retro stuff, but you're not going to adamantly stay there. You're willing to journey and look at stuff.
Except well, I am willing to journey to Pathfinder, but I also think that's the wrong path, too.
Well, that's the thing. Ultimately, nobody will ever be able to get it right. Nobody will ever be able to create the one system to rule them all.
Yeah, that's true.
Although that doesn't mean you can't try.
Well, I guess so. I mean,
that's half the fun is the journey. So, I think that ultimately, yes, is the exceptions based though boils down to flavor and style as much as it does to actual game balance. I've heard it said trying to balance a game is ultimately futile because one, nobody will always be as good as everybody else in every situation. I mean, throughout the previous 4 podcasts, we've covered all sorts of various stuff, like the elements and other stuff that just don't apply to the standard D&D base of move up to a creature, hit it until it dies, progress to next creature.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
Trying to balance them all out is ultimately futile. Like, okay, not big on the bard, but if you're playing a social campaign, the bard is where it's at. There is very few people able to be as socially apt as a bard is. The bard is socially the equivalent of the fighter is as a combat system. If you can understand what I'm trying to say.
I think I do. I'm not sure if... I think I understand what you're saying. I'm not sure if it's necessarily true because there may be, like... I guess I wish I knew more about this, but there may be, like, a paladin might be able to do a little better because he has a high charisma and he has diplomacy.
Should have. Should have. This is D&D. There is no official role such as tank and healer. You can be whatever the heck you want to be. And that's all right. And that's why it's such a great system. You can suck and it's still okay.
Well, okay, yeah, I agree with that 100%. I don't know if everyone does, but that's where I stand too.
You do better when you're focused towards these goals, these aims, and when everybody's working in unison. But you can be completely dysfunctional, and that's still all right for a team. No one's going to call you a noob and kick you out of the gaming square.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. That sounds like paradise gaming. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I think one of the reasons why D&D has been able to survive, so long with so many iterations, while games fall by the wayside. In a video game, if you ain't the best, dude, what are you even doing here? In D&D, if all your stats are horribly arrayed, you don't have anything worthwhile, you can still have all sorts of fun, and nobody can begrudge you.
Well, because in role-playing, you're kind of stuck in the room with those people, and they're the only game around, I guess. Like, because you've all, with role-playing, you've all come to the same house, and you're all there, invested in, like, physically there, whereas a video game, I think we're talking about online games.
They are the easiest way to use a comparison.
But it's the same thing, like, if you go over to your friend's house and play video games together, you are allowed to suck a little bit more than if you go online and play video games.
Oh, yes. But let's work this with WoW. If you don't have that one cookie-cutter build, don't go on the raids. They'll say, what are you doing with this? You're not doing it right. Get out of here.
That's kind of too bad. But
if you are a fighter that just so happens to specialize in weapons that don't deal the most damage every round, and you've put your skill points into cross-class skills, you're just as valid a fighter as anyone else, technically.
Well, again, like, I'm agreeing with you, but I can see snarky people in groups saying, taking other people in the group to task for picking the wrong feats and the wrong weapon and so on.
And that's bad gaming.
So don't do that.
I will say that here. I try to be as liberal as possible. Let everybody have their own opinion. No, that is bad gaming. Because the core concept of the interactive fiction states you don't say no to someone else. You say yes and to someone else.
Okay. Yep. Well, good. So I'm glad we got that message out there. Good.
Yes, that is my firm belief.
Are we done with this topic?
I think we may want to visit it in the future with different little bits and pieces.
Okay, so we have another topic from...
it'd have to be from me, because if it's not from you, then it has to be from the cat, and I don't think very many people would like us talking about meows. If we could put a meme to it, maybe, but no. Alright. My question is, can non-lethal challenges and obstacles be as exciting and rewarding as the standard lethal stuff? Like, we've all read the story where if the hero doesn't save the day, he's dead, his friends are dead, his town is dead, possibly the nation is dead, the world is dead, he's got to save the world. That's kind of standard. It almost sounds like an overused trope, if I may be allowed to use the word without sounding like I'm from the internet. But let's face it, the whole lethality of it kind of gets boring because, you know what? 9 times out of 10, of course, the hero gets through it alive. Someone else may die. Hero tends to live. And so what if the challenge wasn't inherently lethal? Can that still be fun and exciting? Can you do that in a gaming perspective?
Well, I guess, the trick is just to make people care about the characters and want them to succeed. So, if you're playing D&D, you're already a step ahead because people have created a character that they kind of want to play, and they want to play D&D. They want to do something.
And they do tend to be much more invested in their characters than people in some other settings that do tend to be.
Yeah, so in some ways that would let a DM kind of off the hook a little bit, because he can just say, I need a plot that's guaranteed drama. Okay, first plot off the shelf, the world's in peril, kind of deal. Like,
it's not bad, but I mean, with you could have a very nice dramatic fight with some mid to low level characters fighting against slavers who are trying to take them alive. And I've seen players suddenly start receiving non-lethal damage and get very frightened.
Yeah, and I hear it said by players a lot and other places that, I'd rather have my character die than be taken prisoner or something to that effect. I've kind of never understood that mindset because, I think I said this before, but this is my real life kind of morality bleeding through into the game world and saying that no, life is always valuable and precious. Like, so, it's always preferable to live and fight another day.
Of course, mind you, with these players, they aren't themselves dying. They can just roll up another character.
I guess, yeah, the preference is, well, if my character's going to be captured, I don't want to play him anymore. I want to play a character that's not captured.
And there's nothing wrong with being captured. Conan was able to be captured. I mean, and if you're saying that your character would rather die than be captured, you're trying to say you're better than Conan. And I gotta say, you got cojones, buddy. You got cojones.
Yes, indeed. Although Conan, if Conan were given a choice, let me see. If Conan were given a choice between being captured or dying, I don't remember Conan's character exactly, but I don't think he was necessarily the kind of suicidal fighter. He had enough brains to retreat or accept capture or would live to fight another day kind of deal. He wasn't.
Oh yes, he wasn't like the brain dead barbarian everybody tends to play. When they decide to have a quick one-off character, he actually made sure to go in and do things whatever was the most beneficial. I'll say it, the laziest way. Why slaughter your way up 17 stories of a tower to get the ruby when you can climb the outside, sneak in, take it when they're doing a sacrifice ritual, and get out of there?
Yes. Yeah, I like that about Conan. Yeah.
You call it lazy, I suppose. You can call it smart, I suppose. It works out the same in the end.
Yep.
But I think there's some interesting things you can do with non-lethal challenges and objectives. Like, for instance, if you're going to be playing a more diplomatic campaign, you're not going to try and kill your opponent, especially not, out in the open where everyone can see it. There are repercussions to that sort of thing because, hey, civilization.
Yep.
But if you want to plant on their body or in their house or wherever they're living some seditious documents that would wind up having them go to jail and having their good name forever besmirched, I think you have a lot of fun with some sneak stuff going on there.
Well, I agree that it would be fun. It would be an interesting story for the players to be involved in, or if we're talking about a game or a novel, it would be an interesting story to tell. And when it comes to gaming, like, I almost wonder if we're not really, like, if we just trade hit points for resolve points or something like that, and just we could even roll the same dice and we could add the same modifiers and just say, that fight wasn't lethal, it was a battle of wits, battle of the mind instead, kind of deal.
That would be interesting. I suddenly picture a nice quick thing where you have honor. They have that in various incarnations throughout the various editions of D&D. And then you have a nice little verbal duel.
A verbal duel. And you roll dice and everything.
Yeah. It's like, okay, I know this part of history. I can impugn his grandfather. Ooh, he takes an extra 1d6 honor damage from that.
That actually sounds really fun.
Yes, actually, I would be quite happy to do that every once in a while. I think that we're going to have to put a pin in that. We might decide to come up with some quick rules and just toss that out for everyone to have some fun with. Yes.
Honor. Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm writing things down.
Okay, so yeah, and let's face it, non-lethal challenges. I mean, everyone's used to the trap. You step on the whole thing, dirt comes out of the wall and hits you, or like an axe or a blade sweeps out from the side and, oh no, slashes you. What about nets? Nets are very effective, especially if there's no one there to get it off of you. Then it's like this, if you don't get it off, you will slowly die.
Yeah, I guess we're talking about if we're deep, dark in a dungeon somewhere, where, there's no light, and, if you're...
In fact, you can have light. You can slowly die while being able to see yourself, decrepify. Ha ha!
Are there really nets that you can... that are impossible to escape from? Like, even given, if you're in the net for an hour or something like that?
If you don't have anything to cut it with, and, you just got some nice situation where the corners of it get trapped themselves, and put down something on the side so you can't just lift it up and walk with this net like you're some sort of pirate ghost thing going on.
And I'm assuming you can't chew through the net, or...
Well, it could be tough rope sort of thing. It might take you days, and then you got to, daily progress before your whole mouth goes numb and dry, and then all of a sudden you can't even swallow, and then you reach another set of problems.
Oh, well, I want to see this role played out because it'd be like, another hour passes. I roll a escape artist check again.
You can take 20 sort of thing, and then you run into these interesting situations. Or you can even work it with magical traps. You don't need a fireball to always explode in your face whenever you trigger the magical trap. What if you just fall asleep? What if you get paralyzed? That's the same as a net, effectively. All of a sudden you're paralyzed for whatever might come your way. Doesn't that sound Doesn't that sound scary?
Absolutely, and it doesn't have to be lethal to be scary. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
So what about just campaigns as a style where you're not working on killing everything?
Well, that makes sense because often the characters that you create have backstories that don't necessarily involve kill.
Not everybody is a homicidal maniac.
Yeah.
Despite what the game system will say.
Yeah, and I prefer a campaign that assumes that the characters have a little bit of humanity in them, and they would be merciful to prisoners if they captured prisoners. They don't always have to be, but yeah, kind of.
I would like to have a party, be in a party, raid a small goblin stronghold, cave system, whatever they are. Just go in there, instead of killing them, you knock them all unconscious, steal our stuff, just rob them blind, and then leave them in poverty and humiliation.
And why you want to do this? Because it's your fantasy that you want to fulfill?
I think it would be a greater challenge to do so. To get through an entire, adventure without killing anybody. Doesn't that sound like more of a challenge than, oh, geez, I'm out of arrows. Let's go back to town and fill up so I can, more headshots.
Yes, it sounds like an interesting challenge. I guess if you got the whole group on board with you.
I think it could be a lot of fun.
Maybe there's something that, the quest giver can hand out. It's like, as a side note to this quest, all of these people, if they're killed, a spell goes off that kills my daughter, or something like that.
Or you just make it a curse sort of thing. They are integral to this. They must be here. They had a shaman put a spell on the thing. Should they ever be wiped out, a terrible travesty will befall the woods around them. They're in woods, right? Goblins? I think they're a wooded creature.
I would put goblins in the woods, I think, or, some kind of scraggly hills,
Oh, they work everywhere. They're goblins. They work wherever you want to put them. But yes, so you can have all sorts of fun added challenge to that, and then you can reward the players for saying, hey, congratulations, you killed nobody. You got in 10 fights, nobody died either side. I loved it. Here's an extra 10%.
Oh, are we talking as the quest giver again, or
as the DM in this case?
DM?
I would, yeah.
Just saying. But is that a goal do you want the players to set it for themselves, or you were saying you wanted to be the player in that situation?
I would like to be the player because I find a great challenge in it, and as a player, I always appreciate a good challenge.
Oh, I see.
I wouldn't
Okay,
mind being the DM as well, because I would like to see it from that perspective.
Yep.
Yeah, because let's work this as a line, on a different campaign setting. Let's go with the Shadowrun, where everything tends to happen in futuristic Seattle.
Yeah. Seattle.
Yes. So let's work under the thing that you're not a bunch of ruthless mercenaries who do quasi-legal operations at the behest of major mega corporations. You're a news crew, investigations team. You're doing freelance work for whoever will wind up paying for your stories.
Okay, so instead of mercenaries, you're journalists. You're still doing a professional job, but it's not so bloody. And why, like, that? It's strange that all these games, like Shadowrun to D&D to all these role-playing games, they're always bloody.
Well, that's the thing. Shadowrun doesn't need to be bloody. They have a nice variety of spells that are inherently non-lethal. And if they don't have a non-lethal version themselves, they definitely open themselves up to, this is how this works, this is how that works. If you want to create your own custom spell that does this, that works both ways, here's how it would work out. And so that works out quite nicely. But I think in this case, Shadowrun works better because most of the people you fight are other creatures with IDs, personalities, theoretically, and are people. If you kill them, you have just committed homicide, as opposed to killing another batch of 4 to 6 goblins.
Yeah, although, I imagine a D&D world with a little bit more law and order, like...
I would dig that, where you have all the races together, all the monsters, and they're all considered intelligent enough. If they're intelligent enough, they have legal protection.
Yeah. Well, and my thought is that generally good aligned characters would not just murder, goblins just for no reason. I mean, if they have to, I don't know. That whole scenario where, okay, goblins are raiding the village, so we have to kill the goblins. I don't know how that works with a good alignment.
Then it's a self-defense sort of thing. And D&D does have that weird thing where killing an evil person is an objectively good act. Because their alignments system there isn't... it is not subjective, it's objective. Evil is a thing.
Well, I know that, and it might be written that way in D&D. It's just not how I interpret it. And... I don't know if my games would suffer because of this, but basically I interpret that, like, taking any life, even an evil life, is an evil act in itself.
Well, that's the thing. Doing it maliciously can be an evil act. There is some intent behind it. The Book of Evil, Darkness, and Exalted Deeds, those two actually went a very nice way at explaining how the objective system works. See, because D&D, though, is weird in the fact that because you're evil, killing an evil person is a good thing. Who's evil? Well, here's a spell with the good descriptor, and it hurts only evil creatures. If you got hurt, well, buddy, it was your own fault. You're evil. I just did a good deed in smiting you.
And that kind of bothers me, too. Maybe it shouldn't because it's just a game, but...
It's a quirk that comes out of the system. It wasn't ever an intended effect. It's just something that happened as an emergent property over the years.
Well, I am a fan of emergent properties, I gotta admit that.
It's one of the things that it's a stress line on the system as a whole. Here's how the system works. When you play with it, here's where the cracks develop. If you can understand my perspective of discussing it in a metaphysical context.
I suppose. It's just my reaction continues to be that, well, okay, it doesn't work that way because...
it's all very much your prerogative.
I guess if I were the DM, I would have that option of saying, in this world, this is evil and not good, or this is good, not evil, so on.
Killing people wantonly is not an inherently good act, no matter how evil they may be, according to the Monster Manual.
Oh, okay. So that's the case in the rules. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, but if you know the goblins are evil, they've done historically evil things. Yeah, you can go to their cave system and kill every last one of them, except for the people that are clearly not putting up a struggle, and then that's completely allowable under the strictest setting.
Well, and allowable is one thing, and like I think this is a place where there's a distinction to be made, because you can say, oh, good people can do that and remain good. I just don't think the act itself is ever like slaying another creature is not good, is never good. It can be neutral if your intentions are the greater good.
Yeah.
But it in itself is not, like, that won't put you further towards heaven.
Yes. Well, I mean, I've always found that sort of act myself very mercenary. And in fact, I've warned good people that, no, you can't mutilate an evil corpse and have that be a good act, because an evil creature mutilating a good corpse is an evil act. It doesn't necessarily flip, reverse, and become okay.
Yeah, and I think that's true. That's not to say that I would prevent a player from, if the player thought that his motivation was to mutilate the evil corpse or whatever,
I would give a cleric or paladin warning on that sort of thing. Dude, this is not exactly the highest ideal you are following through on. But this is why I brought Shadowrun in, because these creatures are people. There is a system, a body of laws that does protect them, even if they're technically in this campaign sinless in that they have no social identification number. So they can be non-entities, non-tax-paying entities, but if you kill them, you still killed a person.
Well, I love that idea, because in the game it's like, oh well, if they're not documented, then it can't be illegal to kill them. Like, if
it actually is.
Can you imagine that applied to real life? It's like, this person has no ID, therefore anyone may slay them at will.
On the other hand, they do have some interesting things every once in a while, whereby I believe the dragon Dunkelzahn in his will put it for one person. For the period of 1 year, this person is to be stripped of their sin, their social, their system identification number.
Yeah.
They have no sin. They are a non-entity for a period of 1 full year. Should they die, the person who kills them gets 100,000 Nuyen credits. And presumably this person was just a ripe bastard and has done this sort of thing in plentiful times in the past. And Dunkelzahn was from beyond the grave getting some sort of karmic revenge upon them. So how do you like it?
Yes.
So apparently, yes, you can actually be stripped of your identification and become a non-entity under the governmental regulations of 2063.
Well, okay. I think that's a fun way of exploring the future dystopian existence.
We'll call it semi-dystopian. There's actually some pretty awesome stuff going on there.
Oh yeah, okay, of course.
Don't get me wrong. Things are pretty horrible, and the baseline assumption of the game is you are doing very illegal acts, and the best you can hope for is quasi-legal.
Mm-hmm.
It's not explicitly stated, but you're probably going to get shot at for doing it. Oh.
Well, and I mean, we have gangster games, gangster role-playing games. We have cowboy role-playing games. Or I shouldn't say cowboy. What's the evil...
Wild West. Weird West.
You're not a... What are the bad guys in cowboy movies? Are they...
They tend to be called black hats.
Okay, black hats. Yeah.
Good guy wears the white hat, bad guy wears the black hat.
Yeah. And I don't mean Indians, because that's a different dimension.
We'll call them feather cats.
But the European kind of guys who are not cowboys, but the bad guys.
Yeah, they'd be called, though, the black hats.
Okay, black
colloquially.
hats. Yeah.
When you're meeting them for the showdown at high noon, they're the one wearing the black hat.
Yeah.
Historically.
Although I guess I can't imagine, like, it can happen, but generally, like, if you were to play a Western-themed role-playing game, probably the core assumption is that the players will be the white hats. Like, that's the main...
Given the wild nature of the Wild West, let's call them brown hats.
Brown, or gray, no, could they be gray hats? Brown hats?
Well, brown hats are a more natural version of a not white.
Brown hats. I actually like that as a... Maybe that could be a name for a series, Brown Hats. That could be a new Western.
Can it have...
role-playing game.
Can we mix standard D&D with that? Can it be like the Wild West, but with dwarves and elves? Because I would totally get into that.
Okay, it's going to be called Brown Hats, and there's going to be dwarves and elves in it.
Well, there'd be other stuff. I mean, you could have like orcs and other stuff going on in there too. But I just say elves and dwarves because they are the standard for fantasy. And then we get to see how they work out in a setting with firearms, crude firearms. And then, you could even work magic into there, saying that the guns aren't actually guns in any conventional sense. They're like wands. Because really, is there any difference than like a guy shooting at you or a wizard casting a spell at you, a non-AoE? Is there really any functional difference?
Yes, but I can imagine them being at least analogous.
Yes, they serve the same role. You got to duck for cover. This guy's aiming, damaging things at you.
Although magic missile you don't have to roll for, so I think you don't have to aim magic missile necessarily.
Well, you do have to see the person, so there's that.
Okay, yeah.
But let's face it, magic missile is the system's way of saying, wow, only one spell a day, and guess we'll give you a free hit one, because otherwise if you miss with your one spell a day, Mr. First Level Wizard, you are going to get laughed at.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think that's a decent basis for a campaign sort of thing.
Yep.
Yeah. There's all sorts of fun you could do with that.
How did we get there? Westerns.
Describing the morality systems and basics with non-lethal challenges. For instance, if we wanted to incorporate the non-lethal challenge in there, we could make the main characters be bounty hunters. Dead or alive doesn't apply to everybody. Sometimes it's got to be alive. How do you get your target home alive? Especially when they're an ornery son of a rattlesnake.
Yeah. So when you say like non-lethal challenges, when you bring this up as an idea, you're basically saying like, let's do this. Let's make this a thing that we try.
Well, I have heard some people say that non-lethal challenges are a cop-out. There should be no reward without the danger. So if the DM is only putting them up against non-lethal challenges, the worst that happens is the players get knocked out for... how long does a sleep spell last without being disturbed? Something like what?
On the order of minutes? Oh, no, like an hour? I don't know.
I think if it's undisturbed, it can be, up to an hour. So it's, oh no, the worst that happens is you fail and get well rested. Oh...
I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah.
So some people do perceive it as being less because it's not lethal.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say like that's the best goal to, like, when you're writing an adventure or a story or whatever, is that the first thing that should come to your head is I don't want to make this lethal. On the other hand, it is a good check against always running the same kind of, death and destruction every single adventure.
And I do believe it works very well for gracious starting players, especially at low levels. If you don't know all the stuff you can do, like I remember teaching my younger brother D&D. He had only ever played stuff like Final Fantasy. The concept other than fight, magic, use item blew his mind. He had one character, instead of fighting in combat, just went da-da-da on the ground, walking in circles because he could. It was just so alien to him. Like, I don't have just these three options. I have potentially infinite options. My mind, she is blown. So in that case, especially with the less experienced people, I find non-lethal encounters a very nice way of helping them learn the ropes.
Yeah. Although I gotta say, I think having the character get down on the ground and run like in a circle saying da 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 kind of shows a little bit of a hole in that idea of you can do anything.
Well, it was only for the one round.
But I guess it's funny just that.
But it's just, I can do this? This is an option for me? It was just so, he had to see if he actually could do it. It's like, because he had only ever played the video games where you have limited options. And that is one of the other reasons I think D&D has done so well for so long, is because you're not limited to every round. You can do one of 6 actions at most. You can try to do whatever you want. Mm-hmm. The harder it is, the more likely you are failing. Yeah, you can try swimming up the waterfall, but the chances are slim you'll actually succeed. But you can try.
Yeah, you can try anything.
There's that waist-high barrier. preventing you from finding the exit to the cave, yeah, you can actually make a running jump check to do that because, oh no, there's some creatures following behind you.
Oh, I hate waist-high barriers in video games.
I know, right? I mean, dude, you are supposed to be a great fighter. Why can you not lift your leg up so high? Why can you not just put your butt on the side and then legs up and swivel yourself over?
It's too bad because I think like video games. I think the future of video games is to get better at that sort of thing, or at least make it more invisible, the things you can't do. I mean, I play Minecraft, and there's nothing like there's nowhere. Well, there's a basement limit and there's a sky limit,
and then there's the four walls limit. But within there, it's effectively the sandbox game.
Well, there's no on the version I play. There's no walls. There's no end to the world.
Oh, does it circle around on itself?
It just go. Well, actually, there is an end. It would take you something like a year of gameplay or something like that straight.
Oh my, that's a huge map, man.
It generates randomly as you go. It's procedurally generated.
Ah, okay.
So it's just basically random terrain. What was it?
But you don't have just these limited options in there. You have much more, and especially with a game like Minecraft, what you decide to do with these options become multiplied because there isn't a restriction against it.
Yeah, and so I guess in some ways, like video games are a threat to the tabletop role playing game or the novel or whatever.
See, I've never seen them as being an ultimate threat. They are a menace in some cases.
Menace.
They can pose a challenge. They can sap us table players of our numbers, but they'll never fully get rid of us because they can never, I believe, duplicate the ability of one person to say, I want to do this, and another person to say, try it.
Yeah. Well, I think you're probably right. There probably is. The only limit is your imagination.
And that's why D&D lasts, and why almost all the game stuff for the tabletop has lasted so well and has this replayability even decades after the company has gone belly up and you may be one of only 100 people left who owns a copy of it.
Well, I don't know if I'd say... Well, no. It's one of the reasons for D&D's success. I wouldn't say it's the sole reason.
No, there's no sole reason for the success, but I do believe it should be chalked up as one of the significant reasons.
Okay, yeah, I'd agree. I think it's important to D&D. I always go back to this idea of there's a narrative going on beneath it that says, yes, you can do anything, but you're going in this dungeon, you're gonna fight the orc, you're gonna swing your sword at him, kind of like, wink, wink, you're doing it.
That's a little railroading. Trust me, I've had players that say, oh, okay, so there's a dungeon for us to go. All we have to do is march a half day west, and there we go. We'll head east.
I've been there. Was I in that group?
We've all been in that group. At some point or another, we've all been in that group who just decides, let's test this out. And I'm fine with that, man. That just means that the players are exploring the place. They're trying out the system, the setting, everything. And I've always encouraged that, even if it means I have to make up something on the spot. Oh, hey, look, second dungeon. It's a mirror image of the first.
Well, I like, yeah, of course. I like that you're in favor of that because I think this is a theory that I developed after I started gaming, because when I first started gaming, it's like, oh, I can do anything, screw that dungeon, I'm going off on my own. But
I'm going to chop down a tree. Why? Because I can.
Yeah, and I think I've came around to a different kind of outlook on the gaming, is that I want to experience the story that has been prepared. And maybe it's, I don't know why I'm like this, maybe I have limited time, so I want to see, the best possible result. So I look for what's been prepared. I look for, the meat of the adventure.
Well, I think it may come down to an underlying thing. Like, as I said earlier, gaming, especially when you're with other people at a tabletop, shouldn't have the word no in it when you guys are doing something. It should have a yes and.
Well, yeah, I like that. Yeah.
So, in this case, even though the players are saying no to the dungeon and they're going somewhere else, I'm okay with it because I don't want to railroad. If they want to go east and then wind up effectively doing a little more than traveling east for 4 hours in real time, yeah, go for it. But I think you've understood that basic that you understand. Okay, the DM says there's a dungeon here that needs exploring. You don't say no and go elsewhere. You say yes, and then you go in and you do it in your own style, in your own flavor.
Yeah, I think so. So, well, I guess, yeah, yes, and that's the way to do. Okay, yeah, no, I understand how you look at that, and then that's good.
So, I think that it should be at least every gamer's underlying philosophy when they're at the table.
Yeah.
Don't try to naysay another player. Work with, not against.
Yeah, and well, that's your starting point. Basically, is work with your group, work with your DM. That's your starting point. Once you get to know them a little bit, it can be fun to be like to put your foot down. Like, don't ruin their fun. I'm saying, but if there's something you got to know your group, you got to know what the other players in your group are going to react to it. But you could just say, no, we're not doing that, or something like that. But once you know them a little bit better.
It is against my philosophy to do this. You in this case, you're not saying no. You're saying no because, in which case it is a little bit more allowable. You have a justification for it.
But I'd say that's advanced gaming, advanced D&D.
Yeah. Well, you can say it's a little bit more integrated in this case because you're working with everybody, and as opposed to just come out saying no. Although I want to do this.
Yeah, I guess I was saying no as in the player says no, but it could also be that the character, he's role playing his character. His character's like, I'm a half orc. Why would I go murder my cousins? Kind of deal. So I'm not going in that dungeon. Well, maybe that's role playing. That's fun.
Yeah.
And maybe he can be convinced to go, or maybe he can be convinced to take a different role, or maybe he can convince the party not to go.
Maybe he could convince the party to not kill the orcs, but simply render them unconscious as they then loot the place and then, show the orcs, listen, we're powerful enough not to kill you, but knock you out, leave. Hey, now we're back to non-lethal challenges.
Back to non-lethal challenges. And we've gone just over 90 minutes.
All right.
I guess we'll wrap it up here, and we'll say we'll see you again. You will hear us talk again in another week for us. By the time it's uploaded, it's probably all going to be in a row, so you could roll right on to the next one if you'd like. So this is Josh Trelevin signing off.
And this is Ryan Kirkby signing off with him.
Okay. Oh, and send us money.